this is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting July the 1st, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. This week I spent a lot of time and energy working with playing cards, so I had considered working with a playing card deck this week. But as the week went on, I started to think about working with tarot because I hadn't worked with a tarot deck in some time. So I was going back and forth between playing cards, tarot cards, playing cards, tarot cards. And then I came up with a compromise. The deck that's going to be assisting me for this week's reading is the Arcana Tarot Playing Cards by Chris Ovdienko of Dead on Paper. And I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a closer look at the cards that are going to be making up this week's video reading. And here we are with the cards on the table. I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I do, I'm focusing on my usual intention for these weekly general readings. And that is for the information, the guidance, the advice, the insights that will be most helpful and beneficial as we move through the upcoming week. Feeling one more time will be good. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And now I'm looking for 6 cards in the fan that are getting my attention because I'm working with the pyramid spread, and that consists of 6 cards. Card 3 I see over here. Card 4. And 6. So I have the 6 cards selected. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up, and I will move that to one side. All right. So now I'm going to count back. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's for me to make sure that I actually did pull 6 cards. So now at this point, if you're new to seeing me lay out the pyramid spread, it gets laid out this way. Card 1 is the top of the pyramid, and it is known as the issue card. So this will tell us what the focus is or the central issue for the week ahead. Then cards 2 and 3 get laid as the next tier below it, and they tell us more about the issue card. So these are factors or conditions that are influencing the issue, right? And then the last 3 cards get laid as the foundation of the pyramid. And these usually can represent some ways that the situation or the issue will get played out. So that is how you lay out the pyramid spread. And so now I'm just taking a moment to straighten out the cards. All right. So now taking a look at our first card, the issue for the week is, here we have the 5 of Spades. So Spades is a suit for me that can represent problems, challenges, difficulties, obstacles, and blocks, right? And so the 5 is a number of change and activity. So some possibilities with this card could represent that there is a need to handle, because the 5 can also represent the hand. If you go with the idea about 5 fingers on a hand, it's about handling some problems, some challenges, some difficulties this week, right? So that's one way of looking at it. I call this the handling a problem or difficulty card, right? It could also suggest that there is some difficulty, that would be the Spades, about how to handle a particular problem, right? So there may be a problem that we may be experiencing, but there may be some difficulty as to how to best handle the situation, right? So there's that. For some people, it could just be a matter of a change, the 5, in the way that we think about something, because spades for me can represent the mind and thinking. So this could just be a change in mind, a change in mindset, change in the way that we're thinking. And it could be as a result of, a problem, a difficulty, or a particular challenge, right? The challenge shows up to get us to change the way that we've been thinking about a particular situation, right? So it makes me think like we could be having a challenge, difficulty, experience that leads to a change of mind or a change in thinking, right? Or a change in mindset. Another possibility here, going with the idea that the 5 can represent change, there may be a change in terms of separating ourselves from something or distancing ourselves from something, because this card can represent a split, a separation, or some kind of divorce. So some people may actively, the number 5, going through a process of separation, split, divorce, maybe in a particular relationship. But it could also be, just more metaphorically speaking, what do we need to separate ourselves from? What do we need to divorce ourselves from? And that could be people, but it could also be about situations, conditions, circumstances. Is there something that we need to divorce ourselves or separate ourselves from? Right? And if that's the case, then this card could suggest it may be somewhat of a challenge to do so. In a positive sense, some people may be faced with this idea about separating themselves or divorcing themselves from something because the situation is, in a way, forcing you to stand on your own 2 feet. And in that regard, then this card is about fostering some kind of independence, right? So you may be going through a difficult circumstance, but the underlying lesson in it, if you will, it's getting you to stand on your own 2 feet and foster a greater sense of independence. And some people may be seeking to separate themselves from something or divorce themselves from something because they want to have a greater sense of independence, because the number 5 in that regard is all about freedom. So it could be in a larger metaphorical context, what do we need to free ourselves from? Right? And if that's the case, then Spades is all about the process of elimination. Right? So for me, the 5 of Spades, again, can represent, first and foremost, a change in thinking, a change in mindset, a change of mind. It could be about how to best handle a difficulty, a problem. And also, what do we need to separate ourselves from? What do we need to divorce ourselves from? And in doing so, will that allow us a greater sense of independence? So that is the 5 of Spades. So now let's take a look at the next 2 cards, because they're going to give us more information about the 5 of Spades. First card. And here we have, and I'm going to turn it upright. So here we have the Emperor. And the reason why I turned it upright is because I typically don't read reverse cards. So my mind tells me that all the cards are going to be reversed. So I may wind up doing that for all the cards. But the Emperor is all about, now it's no mistaking here. So I talked about this idea about freedom and independence. The Emperor is all about power and control. So if we are separating ourselves from something, if we are feeling the need to divorce ourselves from something, the reason being is because we are seeking a greater sense of power and control in our lives. This, for me, the Emperor, is all about self-empowerment. Right? Now, for those who may be going through a divorce type situation in the literal sense, then the Emperor can represent a man. Right? So it could be saying to, like, we are divorcing ourselves from a particular type of man. Now, that could be if you are married or in a long-term relationship with a man. Now, for some of us, the Emperor can also represent father. So for some of us, it may be about divorcing ourselves or separating ourselves from or creating distance with our fathers, or an influence from our fathers. Remember, I talked about the 5 of Spades also about being a change in mindset, a change in thinking, right? It could be divorcing ourselves from a belief or an idea or a way of thinking that we picked up, meaning like we inherited or adopted from our fathers or some other type of male authority figure if it's not exactly our father, right? It could be a father figure, but for me, this could represent either our fathers or some other male authority figure, right? But if I go with the idea that this is about, you know, empowerment, then that would make sense with the Five of Spades talking about, you know, learning to cope with a problem, learning to stand on our own feet. That's about coming into our own sense of power, you know, empowering ourselves, taking our power back. So this could be a week where we are actually reclaiming our power, right? And understanding if we are making some changes in our life, then this is about understanding that you are the best authority on your life, right? Other people can weigh in, and they could either be well-intentioned in offering their thoughts for your consideration, or they could be trying to impose. Now remember, this card was reversed at first, right? So this could be a loss of power, or, you know, the sense of, you know, being around somebody who's too controlling, right? So there's that, and then if we turn it upright, it's about reclaiming that sense of power, right? If you feel like you've lost power or you don't have control, then this is about regaining that, right? And so how can you foster a greater sense of independence? But if you are working on creating change and actively having difficulty with that process, then this card could be about creating a sense of order, structure, and discipline. It could just be a matter of you not being disciplined enough to create the changes that you might need to consider creating, right? Because the Emperor is all about order, structure, and discipline. So again, the Emperor is about, for me, my first impulse is to go with the idea that this is about self-empowerment this week, right? But it's also about creating a sense of order, structure, and being disciplined, especially if we are seeking to create changes and we're having difficulty with that. It could just be a matter of there may be a need for more order, structure, or discipline in the process. But it could also be about divorcing ourselves from either controlling people, specifically male authority figures. So this could be dad or somebody who comes across like a father figure, right? Somebody who may be wanting to impose. Right, so that I see that. And if that's the case, then the Five of Spades would be offering, this could be the week to set some much needed boundaries, right? So this could just be a matter of if people are trying to impose, then it's a matter of drawing a line in the sand and setting some much needed boundaries. So that is one side of the issue. Let's take a look at what's on the other side. And I'm going to turn the card this way because it may be, okay. So here we have the Nine of Spades. So now 2 out of the 3 cards come from the suit of Spades. Remember, Spades is all about problems, difficulties, and challenges. So here we have, with the Nine of Spades, this is known as loss or disappointment, right? So it could just be a matter of if we're needing to create some changes in our lives and we're having difficulty doing that, or if we are needing to have a change in mindset, you know, change the way we're thinking about a particular experience, especially if it's a difficult one, then there may be an underlying thought or belief around either loss or disappointment. You know, we may understand that some changes need to be made, but there may be a fear about what could be lost, right? Or who we're going to disappoint, right? If I lay the card down, then here we have a male authority figure. So this could be a man if we're talking about the legal or literal process of separation and divorce. This could be a husband or husband type figure. But it could also be, if we're talking about a parental authority, then this could be father. And then if we're having difficulty, right, we want to create a greater sense of independence, but we're having difficulty with that because we may be concerned about some sort of disappointment from this particular person or figure. right? Especially if it is a parent, then there may be a sense of not wanting to disappoint that parent, right? That's playing into the situation. Again, because the Nine of Spades is all about loss and disappointment, right? And so two spades here could suggest that maybe what's needing to change here, because I talked about change in mindset, change in thinking, is because this has been an ongoing situation, right? Two spades for me can usually represent a challenge that's ongoing. And so it may get to the point where you've had enough, because the nine in this particular case could represent wanting to wrap something up or to complete some unfinished business. Right, so that's how I would read the Nine of Spades. So now let's take a look here at the bottom tier. And here is the first card. Here we have the Four of Clubs. So now remember, this row can talk about ways that we may want to consider wrapping the situation up or how it could play itself out. The Four of Clubs is a card for me that can represent work or effort. So this would suggest that work or effort may need to be put into the situation, right? This card is about having a plan. This is about planning and building on something. So it's about laying a groundwork or the foundation. That's the number 4. And then having a plan to build on that, right? So the first thing here may be like, is there some sort of groundwork or a foundation that you could begin laying so you can begin the process of moving on or progression, because this card is also known as the vehicle card. This card can represent a car, right? Or some kind of vehicle. So that's a metaphorical pun for progression, moving on, right? So there is that. If we're talking about the idea, because this is the second 4 in the reading, and the Emperor is also a 4 card, so we have 2 4s. So this is again a need for maybe some order, some structure, some discipline, right? Now, if I put the card down and we're talking about a man who may be playing a role or a part, male authority figure, right? If it's dad or somebody who's like dad or a significant man in the situation, then this card is about communication. This is known as the, I call it the phone call card, right? So this could just be a matter of getting on the phone. But if it's not the phone in the literal sense, then this could just be a matter of communication in all forms this week. So it could just be a matter of one way to work through the situation is to communicate. And since it's closest to the Emperor here, maybe communicating with this particular figure, right? And being willing to create room or space for that conversation, because this is known as a room card, because the 4 of Clubs can represent a room with 4 walls. We're playing on the idea about a room having 4 walls, right? And as I'm saying the word 4 walls, it could be a matter of, are we willing to let down some of the walls that maybe we have created, constructed, because the 4 is a number of stability and security. So maybe we've done that to kind of protect ourselves. And maybe if we're creating a greater sense of independence or wanting to move on from a situation, then it could just be a matter of letting down some of the walls that we may have constructed. And I'm going to do this. If I go back to the idea that the Emperor was first reversed when I turned it, when I first turned it over, then this could be a matter when we give up our own power, when we relinquish power and control to some degree, we create our own sense of imprisoning ourselves in a particular space. We create a form of limitation and restriction for ourselves that keeps us from moving on, right? That keeps us from progressing, because the suit of clubs is all about progression, right? And as I'm talking about that, another aspect of clubs is coming to mind is this idea about teaching and learning, right? So this could be a very significant experience with the Emperor, that we're being taught a very valuable lesson, right? So what is the experience teaching you? Now remember, it's all lessons are designed to teach us about ourselves as well as other people who are involved, right? So what are you learning about yourself in terms of moments when you choose to abdicate your own sense of power, right? When you're feeling or believing yourself to be disempowered, right? What's the lesson in that for you, right? But the gist of the four of clubs for me can represent progression because it can represent a car or a vehicle, or communication because it can represent a phone, right? So it could just be saying too, like, one of the things that we might need to consider is this the week where we need to have a much needed conversation, right? And if it's not that, then what is the plan for creating order, structure, discipline in our lives so that we can foster a greater sense of independence and freedom? So that's the four clubs. Next card. Here we have the page of spades. So here again, we have another spades card, right? So it's very interesting that I talked about this idea about communication and conversation with the four of clubs as a follow-up. Here we have with the page of swords, page or page of spades. Now this is a tarot deck too, so that's why I said page of swords, because you can clearly see on one side there is a spade pip and on the other side there's a sword pip, right? Okay, so I tend to read it more with the playing card pips, right? So this is the page of spades. Pages can represent news or messages. So we have this idea about news or messages being either given or received because it's in the middle of the line. So for me, that could go either way, right? So here we have conversation, communication. Remember, this is the phone call card. And then here we have, following that, is about giving or receiving news or messages. Now, here's the thing. With the spades, this could represent a message that is difficult, right? So this could be either news or message about a problem, or either that the news or messages are going to be difficult, right? So this could be about, like, getting the truth, but the truth is difficult to bear or it's difficult to hear. So it could just be a matter of we need to be mindful about the conversation because the person on the receiving end, if we're the ones who are needing to present some news or message to another party, keep in mind with this card, it may be difficult for them to hear. So if that's the case, plan that in advance. Know that going in. So how can you make the message easier for the person to receive? Right? Because this card is giving you a heads up to go with that in mind. Lead with that. Right? How can you make the message easier for the person to hear and to receive? Now, the other thing that's coming to me in my mind with this card is that I'm hearing the song in my head by Diana Ross, I'm Coming Out. So this could just be some kind of revelation. It doesn't necessarily have to be the coming out process where somebody is coming out as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. It's something of that nature. It could. It doesn't only have to be that. It could mean like coming out with something about yourself that other people either didn't know or are not aware about, that kind of thing. Right? And if we go with the idea that in the pyramid spread that the issue card and this card can be what's known as a hidden dynamic, so this could be revealing some kind of information that could potentially change the way other people think or believe about you. Remember, this was the change of mind or change in thinking, right? So it could just be a matter of information being disclosed that gets other people to change the way they think about you, right? And one of those people could be a male authority figure, right? Or it could be, going with the idea if this is about a separation or divorce, then disclosure of that to the other party could create some kind of change, right? And then one of the other meanings that I have if that resonates with you, then this card can represent, legal paperwork, legal documentation. I sometimes see this as a summons or being served papers, right? So there may be something about that as well in the literal process of splitting, separating, or divorcing, right? But my main go-to here is about this idea about disclosure of information that creates some kind of change that may be difficult for people, right? So if that's the case, if you know that going in, how can you plan for that, right? And understanding, here's another truth, that in truth, you can plan for it, but you are not responsible for another person's reaction or response to information that's disclosed, because you can't control another person. Just like other people can't, in truth, control you, you can't control that, right? So you can only control so much. So here's another lesson with the Emperor, right? This may be a week for you to learn what you can and can't control. And so the only thing, or the only person in a situation that you have any control over in truth is yourself, right? You really can't control another person. So maybe know that going in. So if you're concerned about maybe a particular response to disclosure of information, understand that you can't control that, right? You can control how you deliver the message, but you can't control how other people choose to receive it and choose to react in response or respond to it. But that is the Page of Spades, and I will draw another card because for me, pages represent news or messages, so I will draw an additional card after we look at this card to see what additional news or message this card wants to share. So now let's take a look at the last card here before we get to that. And here we have, okay, so here we have the 10 of clubs. So now the nice thing here with clubs, if I read the cards in a line, and I'm talking about the last three cards, here we have a club, a spade, and a club. For me, the order here is that spade, a spade, excuse me, followed by a club can represent working our way into a problem. And then the other holds true for that. A club followed by a club following a spade, if I can get it out, represents a problem that gets worked out, right? So here's the thing. So it could be as a matter of this scenario where we have information that's being communicated and there may be some difficulty in terms of how it's received. This card at the end would suggest that it will get worked out. However, it will take a great deal of work because clubs for me can represent work or effort. And the 10 can represent a transition, right? It can also represent an ending that leads to a beginning because the 10 reduces to 1 if you add the 1 and the 0. So we have 10 reducing to 1. So here we have a situation that could be potentially ending, but also setting the stage for something new to begin, right? But this card could represent this idea of a lot of work or effort because clubs for me can represent work or effort. So it's very interesting because we had 2 4s, and remember, 4 was about laying a foundation, right? Order, structure, discipline, but it's also a number that's about hard work. And so here we have the result of putting in the work, right? We put in a lot of work or effort and we work through the difficulty, right? Now, in a different sense, for me, this is the business card. So I call this the small business card. So this could just be for some people that there may be something having to do with, because now I'm seeing a different scenario, there may be something having to do with a business, because the Emperor could be somebody who is in business for himself, or something having to do with a male authority figure on the job. So this could be a job situation, a business situation. So somebody could be self-employed. This would be small business and self-employment. Or that somebody is maybe thinking about making the change from being an employee to maybe being self-employed and going through that process, right? Because here we have progression, right? Remember, the clubs can represent progression and something that's becoming more intense. If we go with the idea that we're moving from a 4 to a 10, then there's something that's increasing in intensity. But for me, from a general standpoint, if there is a challenge, is there is a problem or difficulty that we are experiencing this week, then it could work itself out, but there's going to be a lot of work or effort that needs to be put into the situation in order to get it to work out somewhat successfully. Right, so that is what I'm seeing with the card. So now let's go ahead and draw that extra card. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but you'll be able to hear it. The sound that you'll be hearing is me shuffling the cards. And so I'm shuffling with the intention of drawing a message card for the Page of Spades. So I'm asking, what additional news or message does the Page of Spades bring to the table this week? Okay, I'm feeling that's good. I'm going to go ahead and now cut the deck. And again, you probably can't see it. And now I'm going to fan out the cards. And you may be able to see this because I'm going to fan it at the crown of the layout. And so now I'm looking for one card. When I draw a card for a page, it's usually just one card. So I'm seeing this card way over here. I'm going to put that there. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up. And we'll put that to one side. So let's see what the additional news or message card is. And here we have, okay. So here we have the 8 of diamonds. So for me, the suit of diamonds can represent things having to do with energy. So this is about, again, putting energy into a situation. What kind of energy are we going to put into it? The 8 represents power again, so we have this theme about power. So this could be a quote-unquote power struggle kind of situation, and we're putting energy into that. Right? It could also be a situation where we're talking about maybe some sort of financial limitation or restriction, because the suit of diamonds for me can represent money and finances. And so if we're talking about that, if the situation involves money in any way, this card coming up could represent a need to keep some kind of financial records, because this could be about accounting and bookkeeping, things like that. So if somebody is wanting to maybe create a greater sense of independence, but the issue here may be around finances and financial limitation and restriction, then the one thing you're being encouraged to do this week is to start keeping, maybe better records of finances. And so the 8 is a number of circulation, right? So it could just be a matter of keeping records of the money that comes in and the money that goes out. So now that could be in the general sense, but that could also be in the business sense. Remember, I talked about, the possibility of somebody maybe moving on from, working for the man, the emperor, to working for themselves, right? In small business, some kind of small business venture or self-employment venture. If that's the case, then one of the things you're going to have to start learning to do, because pages represent learning stages of development, one of the things you're going to have to learn to do is to keep financial records, right? So this is about learning bookkeeping, learning accounting, those kinds of things, which may be a new thing, right? Because you have to keep track of your own money if you're in business for yourself, right? Now, if you are in business for yourself and you're having this kind of issue, then it's about you taking the time and effort to work out the issues that you're having with the cash flow or the money flow in your business, right? And it could be, one thing you might want to consider is hiring a professional accountant or bookkeeper if you can, right? And if you can't, if it's not in the budget, so to speak, and if you can't, then it's about you taking the time and energy to learn it on your own, right? So that is my usual go-to meaning for the 8 of diamonds. It usually represents financial records, bookkeeping, accounting, keeping an eye on your finances, because the 8 is also a number of, or the 8 of diamonds, I should say, is a card of observation, right? For me, it's known as glasses. I call it the spectacles card, So it could just be, you know, a pun for keeping an eye on something. What do you need to keep an eye on? What do you need to monitor, right? Now, if we go maybe with the more metaphorical and we talk about maybe energy, right? If we are trying, excuse me, to create change in our lives, you know, creating a greater sense of independence, reclaiming our power, that kind of thing, then this could just be a matter of accounting, you know, and I'm going with the idea about accountability, right? Right. If you're going to make plans and take action, that's the suit of clubs in the reading, then it's about holding yourself accountable, especially if you're, maybe that's where the discipline comes in, you know, and it could be if you can't do it for yourself, is there somebody else that you could help help you with that process? So I'm seeing the idea of maybe an accountability partner, meaning like you communicate what it is that you're hoping to do, and then the other person serves as reminding you of the things that you have committed to do to create the change, right? So who could be your accountability partner this week? Now that's a coaching thing, right? As a coach, what it is I'm actually my client's accountability partner, right? So when a client comes to me and they're wanting to create change in their lives and they tell me and we create a plan, then my role after that is to hold them accountable to the things that they said they were going to do in terms of the commitment to their own change process, right? So if you're not working with a coach, who could serve in that kind of capacity for you? Who could be your accountability partner, right? Now, another thing that's coming to me as I'm talking about, you know, accounting, you know, and this could just be a matter of be mindful of the energy of keeping score, keeping records, right? You know, I call this the record keeper card, right? So along with the accounting and the bookkeeping, this could just be a matter of, are we keeping score? You know, and that could be with other people, especially like when, especially with controlling people. Are we keeping record? Are we keeping score? Are you being the record keeper, right? And this could be a week where you're being asked to give that up, to eliminate that. And this is why. Because since we had so many spades in the reading this week, this could be a week where we choose to eliminate something. And maybe one of the things we're being asked to eliminate is this idea about keeping score, right? So that would be another thing to consider. Maybe take a look at or be mindful of the ways in which we may be keeping score, either with ourselves or with other people, right? And if we are keeping score with other people, then it may be this is the week where we maybe make a shift and saying, how do we participate in that? You know, instead of maybe laying it all at the feet of the other person, how do we play into that? What's our role? What's our contribution to that dynamic, right? Because that may be the thing that we may need to eliminate. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end this week's reading here. So I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I wrap up, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week, one in which you reclaim your power because you are the best authority in your own life experience. Take care.